Okay, welcome back to another Gibbs adventure. Today I just want to show how I put up mink. I had a really good trapping instructor years ago named Larry Corville. He was an idol of mine in the Timmins area where I grew up trapping, and Larry had a saying that says there's many ways to do different things, many ways to skin animals, and this is my way, and hopefully you can learn something from it. And the whole idea is to try and share it, and you know, there's better ways, there's worse ways. It's just my way to do it. So thanks for following along.
Please.
So the first thing I want to do is brush the mink. Again, I use a dog slicker brush. Brush it out as good as I can. My next step that I normally do is I take just a pair of cutting pliers and I dock off the two front paws. And you'll see later on why I do that. Oscar's trying to help tonight too. Here's a good reason why I like to wear gloves. You can see a parasite worm here, and they're usually in the joints, so you should always be wearing when you do this sort of stuff. And there's a long name for that worm. I forget it off hand right now, but I'm sure my friend John Chrissy will know. You can see that I always try to wear skinning gloves when I'm skinning. So just to be careful, because invariably when you're trapping, you're going to end up with nicks and cuts on you. And one way to avoid this is to wear gloves. And when you're done, take your gloves off and wash your hands. So just a couple of things. The other thing that's kind of important in a way is to you can use some bleach, some water, bleach cut with some water, and you can bleach off your table after. I know a lot of us are guilty, and I'm one of them, just carrying on all the time, and a little bit of personal hygiene, extra personal hygiene, a little bit extra washing there won't hurt anybody. Now when you're skinning a mink, there's the notorious gland that you're trying to watch out for all the time. Because failure to watch out for the gland will mean that you will nick it. So as I'm going along here, my trusty tail stripper. There's a number of different models. Whatever one you get used to is the one you want to use. Alright, so once I get the tail pulled out, the back legs out, the only other thing to watch out for here, especially on a male like this guy, is the penis bone. And you can just pull on it a little bit and dock it off. Once you have that done, basically I just kind of roll it down here a bit, start pulling it. Okay, so if you remember that very first cut that I made, I'm able to get my finger in there, pull it out on each side. It just makes it easy to pop out the front legs. And then I just pull it right up to the ears. Pinch up the ears a little bit on each side. Give it another pull up to the eyes. Again, I dock it up, pinch it up here a little bit with my fingers. It's one of the easiest things is to skin once you get going. Gonna have a big eyeball there. And there you go. Mink carcasses I always throw back out on the trap line. It feeds the birds, it feeds other mice and shrews and everything else, so it's part of the food chain. And anything I ever throw out on the trap line, if you go back to next year, there's nothing left, so it all gets recycled pretty good. Okay, so once I have it skinned, and if I'm going to put it up later and save it, roll it up in a nice tight ball into a milk bag. Milk bags, Canada, our milk comes in plastic containers and comes in bags, and they're relatively heavy. I'll double bag it, seal it, and write the date and what's in the bag, and into the freezer. Easily lasts a couple of months before you have to process it. In this case tonight, we're going to put it up right away, but like I said, a black marker, the date, and the species that's in the bag, and then load up your freezer. Away you go. So I'm going to put this one on the board right away tonight. It's a male. I follow the same doctrine that I do with my marten. I put male mink on male boards. I only have 3 measurements. It's a copy of a ranch mink board. That's an air dry board. It's slightly different. It's something that trappers really have seen much, but it's an air dry system where they dry it, forced air through it. Again, trappers don't catch them by the thousands, so we just need to have a copy of the same board. When I do it, same as my marten, I put it on the board sideways first. Take one push pin, stick it in the leg like that, and then this is a dull knife, and all I do is I scrape everything off now. Now there's a saddle on a mink, and for the most cases you don't take it off, but I'm going to relate a personal funny experience with me. One time I was at the Saskatchewan Trappers Convention, and they had a mink to skin, and I love doing mink, and my type of mink section is the northern eastern mink. Nice mink, but they don't have a lot of fat or a heavy saddle, but it's a different section of mink. It's more like a Red River Valley mink type out in the Saskatchewan, Manitoba area, and they have a really heavy saddle, so the guys actually take the saddle right off the mink, and you have to actually flesh it like I did my Fisher in the last video. The buyers like to see north central type mink with the saddle on it, but different ones you have to take it off just because of the fat content. So it's not always the same everywhere. There's slight variations that are going to happen all the time. I was lucky. I graded mink, wild mink, for 2 seasons or 3 seasons, and I learned all kinds of things about mink. And probably the #1 biggest mistake that most trappers make is they don't make a big enough inspection window, and for some of the different sections they don't get enough of the fat off it. For my type of mink, again, I'm in northeastern Ontario, and I have a nice mink, and basically all you have to do is clean it up around the legs here and the belly area. So once I have it, the legs cleaned up, I'll take it, I'll center it on the board, okay. Again, I take my knife and I run it down the length of the tail here, splitting the tail right down to the tip. And that's so that the tail, if you don't split the tail, then the tail can't dry properly, and you could end up with taint in it. So that's why you always recommend that you're splitting the tails here. It's not really a recommendation; it's a must. There's a little extra fat around the belly here. So again, take my knife and I scrape it up. This is just a worn-out beaver knife. It used to be quite a bit bigger than what it was. I probably had this knife for 30 plus years. It wasn't quite as big as this, but it kind of started off like that and it's wore down. But it's a perfect knife. No good for skinning beaver anymore, but it's a perfect knife to scrape critters with. So, still got a little bit extra here by the leg. Okay, once I think I have it scraped enough, now, that's the red meat here, that's the saddle, and you're trying to get it so that there's no fat under the saddle. You need to have the fat gone. Again, on my type of section of mink here, they don't carry a lot of fat anyway, so it's not an issue. But if you had like mink from the US, more like what we call a central mink, it's going to have a heavy saddle. You got to really watch out for that. And like I said, the western mink in Western Canada, definitely you got to get that saddle off. Okay, same as my trim the back end here a little bit. Have some little stragglers to clean up. Okay, a little tip for you. I was watching another fella's channel, and he was complaining because he knocked over his push pins, which I've done many times in my life. And I learned this method from Larry Reeves, the old silver fox himself. And it's basically just a piece of 1-inch styrofoam, and you can look, see my push pins, if I was to knock them over, they stay on the thing. If it does fall off the table, you'll lose a couple, but it's not like picking up a 52 card pickup when you drop a deck of cards sort of thing. So it's a good little tip for you. Alright, now when I go to pin it, I start off by, and you can see my lines here, I'm looking to try to get it, in this case, over the line. And you want to be over a line by at least an inch, because if you do it less than that, you want it to have at least half an inch into that size, otherwise it could be thrown down a size. If you pin it right on the line, when it dries, it's going to slide up on you. Fur always shrinks a little bit, so in this case you got to get it over the line. Now, lots of different ways to pin your tails. Again, guys use mesh, guys use cardboard, some guys use push pins. Doesn't matter, as long as you pin it up on the pin it out and up and open, so it'll dry. Now, when I pin out a tail, my method of pinning it is short and fat, and I pleat the tail somewhat, not totally, but I like a nice short tail, clean, and I do that by going down an inch and pulling it up, back and forth. I alternate on each side, trying to keep it centered in the board. That pin come out. And again, there's lots of different ways to do this. Back in the day when I used to do a little bit of fur handling competition, I always did really well with my mink. I think my name's on a few trophies here and there. But luckily for me, I was very fortunate to be involved with the auction houses, and I know. Oh, there's a push pin that just died. Okay, there you go. There's my pleated tail. I put a few more, a little bit of fat to trim out here. I learned how to put up mink from Paddy Hall, another veteran grader. And Patty was a real fanatic and very much a finesse guy for handling stuff. And I learned a lot of good stuff from Patty over the years. Good friend of mine. There you go. So my feet in this case are opposite of the marten. When I was talking about the marten, my feet are on the back with the tail. Now, I talked about earlier about the inspection window. So there's the penis hole. What I want to do for the inspection window now is lift it up, and I cut it 1 inch below the penis hole. I'm going to take a little wedge of fur out of here. Okay, just a little strip, but I have a perfect inspection window. So when the grader goes to look at my mink, the inspection window, he's actually going to be able to look at this area here without any problem. A lot of guys would bring the legs opposite of the tail when they would close that right up, and I remember having to take a knife sometimes and cut the belly a little bit and open it up. You ever hear that expression, 2 thumbs up? Well, 2 thumbs up come from mink breeding, when the guys used to grab it in the old days and they'd have to roll it with their thumbs, and with 2 thumbs up. That's where that expression came from. Okay, so just 2 last things here that I kind of do with my mink. Once I know that there's no fat, I take the legs and I tuck them in with a nail like this. Okay, each front leg, just tuck it inside. Alright, then I grab the bottom lip, lift it up, and I dock it off. Now, the reason that I do it now on the board instead of doing it on the carcass is because I want a nice round lip like that. When you cut it off the carcass, sometimes it's jagged, so that's how it goes. This way here I get a nice round lip. Okay, this guy has a little bit of damage on the back here, but we don't need to worry about that. But that's the saddle, is the red stuff. So front legs tucked inside, bottom lip removed. Good inspection window, which is critical when the grader goes to look at your mink. And I put the back legs up with the tail, opposite of what I do with the marten or fisher. Now, I never use a wedge, but if you're comfortable using a wedge, I always feed it in from the top. I slide it down from the top like this. I don't feed it up in the belly. It's not the belly area that is hard to get off the board. It's up in the shoulder area where it's tough to get it off. So I always tell people, feed the wedge down from the top if you need to use a wedge. Okay? So just to show you, when I'm done here like this, I don't personally use a belly wedge on a mink. My boards are tapered. If they move a 1/4 inch, they slide off the board. I have a hole in the bottom, and I will hang it up on my rack. I'll show you that after I'm done, but I just hang it by the nose down, and I leave it till it dries. You need a constant source of heat to dry your fur properly. An unheated garage or an unheated shed or something doesn't dry fur properly. When you bring it back into the heat or you put it into the fur bag, when it gets to the auction house, it can taint on you. It can still be wet. So try to find a constant source of heat, 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and put a fan on it to blow the air. Okay? Those are my tips for you. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. I always enjoy putting up mink. Kind of sucks at the prices we're getting nowadays, but it is what it is, and we just carry on, and eventually the market's going to turn for us, and we'll all be back in the game. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoy it. Please like and subscribe. You can hit the bell icon on the station, and it'll let you know when I post new ones. Always looking for feedback and comments. I'm by no means a professional videographer here. Thank God I have my daughter Casey helping me. Again, hopefully you like it and you'll subscribe to my channel. Take care. See you in the next one.
Fun fact, my dad dries all his fur in the bathroom, which I absolutely hate. So if you ever come over, don't use the main bathroom because there's always animals in it.